I have never met a salesperson or a sales team that was struggling because they didn't have some new process or some new tool. They don't talk about tools. They don't talk about technology. They work their freaking asses off.
Hi, my name's Curt Mercadante, and I'm a husband, father, speaker, trainer, and disruptive entrepreneur whose mission is to save the world by helping individuals fight for lives of freedom and fulfillment. And that's what this show is about. We're here to help you fight apathy and conformity in your life. We're here to interview and tell the stories of individuals around the world who are helping others live lives of freedom and fulfillment as well. This is the Freedom Club Podcast, and we're grateful you're here.
We have an excellent, wonderful guest today. I know we're going to have a lot of fun because I just finished his book, and I had a lot of fun reading it. His name's Mike Weinberg. He's the author of a number of books, including his newest book, which is Sales Truth, Debunk the Myths, Apply Powerful Principles, Win More New Sales. Mike, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, fun and freedom. How could I turn down this invitation? Thanks for having me, Curt.
My pleasure. And as I mentioned offline, you know, on this podcast, I've had a number of sales experts because as I work with people and train them and speak, and people email me when they watch my videos, you know, there's a number of people who have wanted to break free into a new lifestyle, a new career. And maybe that career or lifestyle involves entrepreneurship, starting their own business. And they've been held back from that for 5, 10, 15 years, whatever. And one of the most common fears and limiting beliefs that I hear is they're absolutely terrified of sales. And so that's why I love having you on here. But before we get to that, because sometimes I forget to ask this question, what does the word freedom mean to you?
Oh my goodness. Freedom means everything to me. One, it's my love for our country and the opportunities we have before us. My friend Jeb Blunt wrote a great article on July 4th, and he was very honest, you know, and he said, for all of our imperfections and fully acknowledging that the playing field is not level, and some of us have had more privilege and more opportunity, and we're born into better circumstances. Having said all that, this place is unbelievable, right? And we have more opportunity and limitless things that we can pursue and do. So there's the freedom aspect of not being told who and how to worship and where to live and what to do for your career. In the world I'm playing in sales, freedom is everything. People who are masters at selling, who get really good at creating demand and driving business, experience all kinds of freedom. There are salespeople that live in reactive mode as hostage to leads that come their way, or just waiting for opportunities to come to them. But it's in my business, it's the seller who takes responsibility for creating their own opportunities and making things happen, who actually create demand, that experience the most freedom and the most rewards, because they get to pick and choose their strategy and decide where they're going to go and what they're going to do. And all the rewards fall to that person who's really good at doing that. So freedom drives me. It's part of the reason I'm in my own business right now. And my wife reminds me regularly, you may not go work for one of your clients. I don't care how sweet the package they may put together, because you're a crappy employee and you really like your freedom. So the way I say it is, I've always worked for idiots. I still do. I just like this idiot that I work for now.
I love that. And you know, you mentioned the reactive versus proactive, and when you say that, I kind of think of living with intention or working with intention. One of the reasons I love reading good sales books, and we'll talk about the difference between good and bad sales, right? You talk about Sales Truth in the book, is that there's a lot of lessons to be learned on how to live life, not just how to sell, but you talk in the book about that reactive model versus, I like to say that there's people who just take life as it comes to them instead of deciding they're going to impose their will on life. And sometimes I use the term victim society, which carries a lot of connotations and people get offended and they get mad, which is part of the reason I say it. But in a context of business or sales or entrepreneurship, it really does take living with intention and moving forward, and not just saying, I don't have good leads. They're not coming to me. The price is too high, or I can't sell. You talk about that. The price is too high. We have to lower the prices, right?
Yeah, you have great reading comprehension. I love what your takeaways are from the book already. And I like even more that you like to poke the bear, and you will say things that may be extreme to intentionally wake somebody up or offend them, I do the exact same thing.
I can tell.
And I've learned this in consulting and in my writing. Sometimes I need to, if I'm trying to help somebody move the pendulum just a little bit back towards the middle, I've got to stand way out here and scream in extremes to get them to wake up and move towards me just a little bit. So I'm with you. Yeah, there's a victim mentality in sales as well. And whether it's the entrepreneurs, and probably many of your listeners who are in that category, who forgot why they launched their business and that they wanted to be in charge and be someone who demonstrates, the fancy phrase is internal locus of control, right? Like, I own the outcome. I'm responsible for what happens. I'm not a victim. One of my favorite guys I'm following is John Gordon. He's like Mr. Positive, and he's very popular, lots of books, and great follow on Twitter. He's always reminding things. And one of the things I took from his book, The Energy Bus, is we need to get up every morning and in every opportunity we face and say things like, I get to, not I have to. Right. And that little mantra, in fact, he tweeted that yesterday, and I retweeted it, reminded people, like, I'm living by this right now. Instead of whining and complaining and acting like a victim, I need to say, no, I get this opportunity. What a blessing that I get to do this. And that plays itself out in sales in a lot of ways, because there are people in sales roles, whether they be business owners and entrepreneurs or just employees, who forget that. And they see themselves as victims, and they whine and they complain, and it's the territory's fault. It's Obama's fault. Oh, it's still Obama's fault, right? It's Trump's fault. It's definitely Congress's fault on both sides of the aisle. And I'm sure we'll talk a little politics later. It's my mom's fault. It's my stupid company's fault. Like, you know where they never look? In the freaking mirror and go, it's on me. I own it. So yeah, that's a message. That's where freedom comes from. And that's the beauty of sales. And I'm regularly reminding sellers and people that want to get into sales about this. It's a beautiful job because you're judged on what you produce. Nobody asks you how much you worked. They want to know, what were your results? Sales is about results, and results don't lie. And that's, we got to cut through the crap and the nonsense and the busy work and get to the behaviors and the attitudes that move the needle for driving business. So how's that for a winding answer?
Yeah, no, I love it. There's a lot of things I'd love to unpack in there. One is, sure, when you talk about, you're judged on results. I have 5 pillars of the freedom lifestyle that I talk about. Number 1 is superpowers. I'm a Gallup certified strengths coach. So it's finding out what those are and working within those. Number 2 is vision, having a clear vision of where you want to go. Number 3 is alignment and casting that term balance to the side. But number 4 is outcomes and living a radically outcomes focused life, building, there's some companies that judge you on, are you in your seat at 8:30? Do you have a smiling face? All that crap. And you talk a lot about salespeople who fill up their day. They're busy. They go from meeting to meeting. They do relationship building. They do all these things. But in the end, they're not at their phone selling and being judged on results. When you talk about this, do you get a lot of whining and moaning saying, but all of this is important?
Yes. When I come in and say radically simple things to a sales team, like, the reason you're not winning more new business is because you spend very little time working on new business, and you may be working 50, 60, 70 hours a week and really proud that you get to inbox 0 and you're uber responsive to everything that comes your way. And you're the first person to jump in and help out operations, or to volunteer at the July 4th barbecue, or to put out a customer service fire. You suck at sales, and you're on the bottom of the ranking because you don't spend time working on things that move the needle, that create sales. And people, especially conflict averse, highly relational salespeople who love to tell me when I come into their company, Mike, you don't know our business, as if like every business is so different, right? You don't know our business. This is a relationship business. And I need to do everything possible all the time to serve and care for my existing clients. I spend 90% of my time maintaining my territory or servicing my accounts. And you know what? Rarely is that true. And some jobs really are set up with a very heavy account management or service burden. But most of the time, what I'm hearing is a giant excuse from weaker salespeople who get their jollies from overserving their favorite accounts to the point of babysitting them because it makes them feel good, right? And they say stuff like, I sold it, They need me. They trust me. No one's going to do it as well as I am. If I don't do it, who will? And that what is potentially a healthy attitude, but taken to an extreme, ends up costing people sales because they end up playing glorified customer service clerk, right? CSR with a car, customer service rep on wheels, as opposed to someone who's a hunter who sees their job not to maintain a territory or babysit an account list, but to increase revenue. Does that make sense? So yes, people get offended and they get confused and they're like, but I want you to teach us how to sell to committees on Tuesdays. And I'm like, before we get there, why don't we talk about your calendar and your sales math and how much time you spend moving crap around on your desk or your inbox or playing with operation stuff versus how much time you actually spend talking to customers that could buy more or talking to people who are not yet customers who should be because they look, smell, and feel like customers that love us and get value from us. You tracking with me, Curt? Like, I don't mince words. Like, I'm amazed, and I'm a sales nerd. I would love to teach people how to run a better sales call, how to create a better message, how to be more consultative. I do all that. But the truth is, if you're not willing to take control of your time and your calendar and the discipline and stop doing all this other nonsense that fills your day and then work on the 3 sales verbs that are all that matter. Our job in sales is to create, to advance, and to close sales opportunities, right? And if I could just get salespeople to spend more time creating, advancing, and closing and less time playing service clerk or inbox manager, then I'd have a lot less business and I'd be fine with that.
How often do you go into a corporation and the sales team gets it and they're like, I'm with you, I get it. And they're kind of looking at the manager or their boss and the sales team wants to be let go. They want the cage to be open so they can run. And it's the manager, maybe the person who hired you, who is keeping them back. Does that happen a lot?
Not a lot, but it happens. I wrote my second book, Sales Management Simplified, to the owner and the sales executive who has lost their mind and forgot what the sales manager and the salespeople's jobs are. And I do have clients that use their salespeople as free labor. And they put them on other assignments and they end up answering the phones when they roll over to them. And I got one client where the salespeople would have to go out to the warehouse to pick a certain kind of order themselves and then prepare international shipping documents. And that sales team never made its activity targets. And I had to go back to the CEO and say, hey, just so you know, the guy that's managing that facility where you're not making your sales numbers has the salespeople picking up customer service phone calls, has the salespeople in the factory pulling orders, has the salespeople filling out international shipping paperwork. And I'm telling you that I can't even coach them because I can't get to them and they can't get to their sales activity because they're overwhelmed. So it's not super common, but it's out there. And sometimes it's because everybody's trying to be lean or because owners in smaller companies forget the importance of the salesperson and that there's no bottom line without a top line. And sales is not a hobby. And I almost never see someone succeed selling unless they're really focused and spend the majority of their time doing that. And they're really clear about what they're supposed to be doing.
It's interesting. You brought up the companies that are trying to be lean. I was doing a workshop in January and it was mostly HR people, but they had brought in some sales folks and some management to listen as well. And during the Q&A, I had talked about building an outcomes focused work environment. And he was being kind of cryptic. I later learned that his boss was there and there was some other, and he was the head of sales at this company. And he said, listen, I am outcomes focused. I'm selling. I'm blowing through stop signs. The stop signs have been erected by my company and it's enforced by the compliance officer that I can't remember if it was lean or agile or one of those. In the effort to become lean and agile and more outcomes focused, they became so focused on the input of being lean or agile that it was actually holding back their salespeople because they said, no, you have to put on the brakes because of line A, section B says you have to put on the brakes and match it with this. And upon questioning, it was kind of like, listen, I know you're worried about it and I know it's keeping you back. I would say keep blowing through stop signs. And if the CEO has a problem with that, maybe he's not that good of a CEO because he doesn't care about sales.
Curt, I could let you tell that story 5 different ways, and I'm sure you have more examples of that. That is a big problem. And you brought up HR people. Let's just go down that path for a minute. I talk about this in one of the chapters on sales talent in the book. If I hear one more HR person tell me they want to go hire a collaborative team player for a sales hunter role, I'm going to hurt somebody, right? Like it's not. It's like the anti-sales department has taken over from the story you tell, right? About, all the stop signs and how we need to be so careful and politically correct. Some of these corporate culture police are completely ignorant about what it takes to lead a sales team and who you want on the front lines out killing stuff. Like hunting for new business is hard, right? And to go out thinking that the thing we really want is a responsible corporate citizen who's a team player, whose collaboration is high on their list of attributes. I'm like, I'm sorry, but if I took you to my clients in very high integrity companies, defense, consulting, banking, right? I'm not talking about, this is not an integrity conversation and manipulators and doing things that are wrong to win a deal. I'm just talking about the makeup of the humans that are best at acquiring new pieces of business. They tend to be killers by nature, and they're impatient and they're selfish, but in a good way. They own their calendar. They laser focus. They see their job as I'm the forward deployed troops on the front lines, and I got to go out and kill stuff because everybody back at headquarters, their livelihood depends on me doing my primary job and me doing it well. And I don't want to sit on committees, and I don't want to be told I have to collaborate with all these other morons. And I'm not going to do a corporate first thing. I have to go sell. I'm motivated to win, and everyone in the company should be applauding me for doing what I want. Because trust me, the other 95% of the employees don't want to go out and do what I'm doing. In fact, I dare any of them to come with me and watch what I have to do to beat down a door, to get someone to call me back, to get in, to dislodge them from their current supplier, to paint a picture of a better future, to ask really challenging questions, right? To present our solution in such a way that I differentiate ourselves and stay out of the commodity game and avoid the procurement people and all the stuff I'm saying. That takes like guts and willpower. So I know that was a little bit of an extensive rant / sermon on my part, but I've had it with anti-sales morons and HR politically correct people thinking they know what they want in terms of sales because they're wrong. Very, very, very wrong.
And I don't think it's just sales. I think there is this notion, hell, it's not even just in corporate America. I think there is a kind of a societal issue of conformity that, it starts when you're 5 or 6, sit down, shut up, obey, sit in the corner for 6 hours a day. And by the way, if you can't sit still, we're going to diagnose you with a disorder. We're going to give you drugs. There was just an article that a millennial therapist said that she's seeing this huge problem with decision fatigue causing anxiety. And decision fatigue is a real thing amongst everyone. But when you have 35-year-olds who can't make decisions because since 5, everything's been highly structured, sit down, shut up. Thomas Edison was told he had an addled brain. Thank God his mom pulled him out. But I think it comes out in the corporate world, not just in sales, where it's all about kumbaya and harmony, right? I was listening to a podcast this weekend where a major, major tech company, it's so funny because you brought up HR and then you said, kill it, hunters, destroy. This tech company has outlawed the use of those words, anything militaristic or violent. So you can't even use those words. But there's this buzz term of employee engagement. And it's all about kumbaya and harmony. And when I think of employee engagement, I think of buying a dog from the kennel, bringing the dog home, throwing it a bone and saying, engage, rather than empowering the different people on your team to use their superpowers to go achieve key outcomes. And I think it's all part of the same problem, not just sales, but across the board. I think 13% of employees are actually engaged in their work.
Wow. Yeah, I could listen to you. I need to go back and listen to more of your own previous podcast. You energize me the way you see the world and the way you describe things. I mean, what I heard you just say is basically safe zones run amok to a level of insanity where someone with a bizarre, extreme set of values has decided that certain behaviors, while successful, are not welcome here, right? And listen, I want everyone to hear this. Like, I am the nicest guy. I have the deepest levels of compassion, right? We give everywhere we can to help people. We are pro-social justice. I am not a raging righty, right, who has no sensitivity. But when I hear nonsense like that we're going to demean the people, like the reality is in a lot of companies, and forgive the little diversion here, but part of why I wrote Sales Truth was because a lot of the elites in Boston and Silicon Valley, okay, are very popular with what they write. And they always talk about what we should all be doing in sales. But what they never put in there is the disclaimer that they're really writing to the tech companies and the tech sales teams, because they're using phrases and methodologies that the average American salesperson can't relate to. 98% of the world doesn't sell technology. They sell trucks and supplies and consulting and printing and banking. I mean, I missiles. I mean, I could take you through the various things, payroll services, plastics, metals. I mean, I have a very eclectic group of clients in tech and not in tech. But the people that are popular online on LinkedIn who use the buzz phrases are the sales elites that make these broad statements about what works today and what doesn't work. And then they expect that the other 98% of the country is supposed to understand and follow. But actually, a lot of the advice they're preaching is wrong, dead wrong, and the polar opposite of what works in my clients. Whether it's the idiot in the social selling world telling people that Kylie Jenner is your role model for selling, and she's the proof that social selling leads to real sales. She didn't cold call her way to $1 billion in net worth. I mean, that was a real article on LinkedIn. I screenshotted it to save it as proof because I got to believe that moron would delete it once he saw it actually came out in my book. But this is someone who's declared himself and his company as the foremost experts in the world in this thing called social selling, using social media channels to aid your sales effort, which, by the way, I think is brilliant. We should all use all channels and all means necessary to drive demand and create meetings and get a following. But how cheap and disingenuous to use Kylie Jenner as the role model, because the guy that sells sandpaper or Mack trucks or John Deere construction equipment or bank loans or defense systems to the government, which there's just an assortment of people I work with, plastics. Do you think Kylie Jenner's the example of her? I mean, I had to look her up. Like half of her posts are selfies of herself half naked promoting her fashion line.
I've tried that. It doesn't work for me. I've tried the half naked selfies. It doesn't work.
You don't want to see me half naked either. And I don't even care which half, right? Like, so my point is, it's so stupid because these gullible salespeople that are struggling read that nonsense from some nouveau expert who promises to digitally transform your sales effort. And I'm like, that's really going to hurt people, because the clients I work with, that's a nonsense thing, right? I mean, could you imagine trying to explain to a president or a vice president of sales at one of those types of companies I just listed? Here's my plan. Here's how we're going to increase your sales. We're going to get everybody better phones, and we're going to practice angles for taking selfies and how to put out really good content and write really provocative articles so your customers will run to you with cash when they're ready to buy. Your people never need to knock on a door, pick up a phone, ask for a referral. This is the new way. Everything in sales has changed. And you can hear me getting angry as I share this with you. I wrote the book angry because this nonsense hurts people. And it usually hurts the weaker, gullible salespeople that are struggling to fill their funnel. And then they read this nonsense and they're totally deceived. So
it's interesting. And we talked offline, when I had my agency, it was B2B. And there was a friend of mine who had a very successful agency, but was quiet about it, but had some great clients. And he said, those who do, and those who can't blog. Now, I say that, and I know people are going to get angry about that. I blog, I produce a lot of content, but when I switched from B2B to B2C, I tried that route. And the interesting thing about what is social selling, and you talk about it in the book, and I've come to realize there's a difference between PR and marketing and sales, is that social selling, well, in some cases, if I'm selling missiles, right? Selfies and blogs aren't necessarily going to get a direct sale, right? It may help from a branding standpoint, all that. But when I switched, what I learned was in the B2C world, I could build a brand. I knew last year what it could take to get 300,000 or 400,000 views on a video. I drop an F-bomb, I say something. the interesting thing about that and the social selling, in quotes, is that months go like this. Doom. You become a slave to the algorithm. You become a slave to the whims of LinkedIn changing who they're going to let through the gates. All these companies that built their entire company on Facebook pages and then they changed the algorithm are now gone. And it's interesting, this year, my LinkedIn views are way down, but we switched it out and I brought in a sales team that uses a fax and a phone, not a fax, but that's what we say. And yeah, we're still doing things to build the brand, and we're doing retargeting and we're doing these types of things, but there's phones, there's calling, there's all these sorts of things that are going on. And that's just little old me versus, hey, we actually have a target market. We're selling missiles, we're selling plastics, we're doing these things. And so I think, to your point, it is absolutely disingenuous, and people have to realize that social selling may in fact just be branding and marketing, not selling.
That's brilliant. I agree 100%. And if they would call it social marketing, it would help. It would help the perspective, because it's very important. It softens the beachhead. You can build a brand. You can get a following. In certain industries, it works great. But it's not a replacement for the traditional methods that most salespeople need to execute. And it's funny you bring up videos and LinkedIn and algorithms. I'm perplexed at LinkedIn right now. It's become the thing in business, right? Everyone hangs out on LinkedIn all day. I get messages all day long. I'm getting tagged in all kinds of posts. Sometimes I put out a little post or an article or a quote on LinkedIn and get thousands and thousands of views. And then the next day I'll put out something that is better, pithier, stronger, and I'll look, it has a couple hundred views and no interaction. And I guess LinkedIn isn't showing this to people. Like I can't figure out the rhyme or reason. Is it keywords being suppressed? Is it nothing about it makes any sense? I've kind of given up. Like, I'll do it, but there's no connection between the quality of what I put out or the words I'm using that I can find to how many views LinkedIn allows it to have. And I have a pretty big following, and I got a lot going on, but I can't crack the code in my own mind. Am I crazy or? No,
I think, back in November, I decided to declare my LinkedIn freedom, which was, I was getting stressed over because at one point, 100% of my clients were coming from LinkedIn content. And now some people will say, so that means social selling worked. Well, no, it didn't, because there were months where nothing came in, and I became such a slave to the algorithm. And I said, you know what? I'm going to start building my own platform and my own audience. But again, that's PR, that's branding, that's marketing. I think the thing that's also important is that not just in terms of people delivering a bad message or a wrong-headed message on sales, but just the fact that a lot of these people are so full of shit that there are people who get 500,000 views every time they post something. And they go there and they're like, and then you'll talk to someone else and so, she's killing it. He's killing it on LinkedIn. I'm like, but are they? Like, how do you know that? Because I know, and I'll hear, because there's a community, you'll hear, well, so-and-so hasn't had a client in 3 months and he had to start driving an Uber car. And I don't say that to make that person feel bad. I say it to, you say it, look at salespeople cannot take likes and clicks to the bank.
Yeah, Mark Hunter, my buddy Mark Hunter said that.
No one can do that. There's a lot of people getting a lot of likes and a lot of views who have not had a client in months, and they pull the wool over your eyes. And it's like, again, those who.
So, man, thank you, Curt. Let me just jump. First of all, thank you for saying that. And for everyone who's listening, this is going to sound crazy from the two of us preaching, but Curt and I would say would agree. You need to spend less time on LinkedIn looking for sales answers, and you need to do more work. And even though I'm one of those supposed experts you're supposed to be following, I would like all of you to spend less time listening to experts and just get to work. Most people know what they need to do. And it takes there's zero barrier to entry or credentials required to become a thought leader with a following, particularly on LinkedIn. And likes are not the arbiter of sales truth. And my friend Mark Hunter, who Curt just quoted, right? You can't take likes to the bank. And there are idiots in my industry that put stupid stuff on LinkedIn that's supposed to pass the sales advice. And everybody loves it because it tickles their ears. It's the easy button stuff. If you just do this, they're going to come running to you. You'll be a sales magician. The problem is it's not true. It's not true. I read an article in Inc. magazine. I quoted this at the end of the book. And the title was "The Phone is Dead, Cold Calling Doesn't Work Anymore." And it was a very beautifully written article. The only problem is it's not true. And I'm not saying you should be pounding out cold call after cold call after cold call senselessly. But I'm telling you, in software as a service companies and manufacturing companies and industrial companies and big data companies, I've got clients picking up the phone, using it to secure meetings with target accounts, and they're getting meetings, putting opportunities in the funnel, and closing business. One of my software as a service clients last year, 80% of the deals they closed in the year 2018 were from self-generated opportunities, not from their inbound marketing, not from leads, not from trade shows. It was salespeople picking up the phone in a high-tech solution, a SaaS offering. So I just be very careful about what you read online, and that everything that is popular is not necessarily true.
Yeah,
you need to vet it much more carefully.
I think some of those people write it because they don't like to cold call. I hate it. So I hired people who do it.
I hate it.
It works.
I hate it, and I teach it. Jeb Blunt, Fanatical Prospecting, tremendous book once you get past the forward that I wrote for it. I mean, Jeb is a genius when it comes to prospecting. Anthony Iannarino has got a book, Eat Their Lunch. My friend Mark Hunter, High Profit Prospecting. Every one of those books is phenomenal, but we would all admit it. Nobody likes picking up the phone and interrupting somebody. Why do we still do it? Why do we have teams of people that do it? Why do I help clients do it? Because it's effective. And it's really effective when it's done well, when you have the right attitude. And that's in chapter 5 and 6 in the book, right? When you have the right mindset, when you have the right account list, when you have compelling messaging that's about how you help your prospects and your clients and the outcomes you achieve. Everything's different when it all comes together. So in the book, I took the first part, and it's only 25% of the book, to rail against the nonsense and the lies and the myths, to debunk those. But the last 3/4 of the book are all these best practices of how do you become an opportunity creator, and how do you get your attitude, your calendar, your target list, and your messaging right so that you can put a lot of stuff in your pipeline. And then at the end of the book, I get into some best practices of top producers and how to stay out of the procurement pit and maintain differentiation and not sell on price. And it all comes together. This is what the best salespeople are doing today. They don't have tricks. They don't have hacks. I have never met a salesperson or a sales team that was struggling because they didn't have some new process or some new tool. And Curt, there are thousands of companies that sell sales tools today. And every one of them wants the vice president of sales or the owner or the salesperson to think you're not hitting your target because you don't have our cool new tool. And I will tell you, if you look at all the people I work with, no one is pointing to the great tool. And the top 2 producers that I highlight in that chapter of the book, right? They don't talk about tools. They don't talk about technology. They don't have a secret. They don't have shortcuts. They work their freaking asses off, right? They know their business. They know their customers. They know their competitors. They prepare and they practice like crazy when they're backstage. So when they're front stage in front of a prospect or a client, they nail it. And they get relationships, they get messaging, they get being a good consultant, they're likable. Like, those are the things that top salespeople are doing. And none of those are mysterious. So my hope as people read the book is that they're strangely encouraged that they could emulate what the top producers in the world are doing today. And it's not like you're missing some trick, some tool, or some unique process. It's always the basics.
Yeah, I love it. It's like saying that what made Stephen King a great writer was the type of typewriter he used. It's like he used to get up and write. He wrote like 5,000 a day. He just wrote and wrote and wrote. He didn't just stare at his desk and say, well, today I have to organize my desk. And, he wrote. Getting down into, one thing you talk about that I guarantee some people will misunderstand based on reading between the lines and something you said today, is the notion of value. And you talk in a number of cases about servicing kind of existing clients versus going out and hunting. And I could see some people reading, oh, that's a total contradiction from everything I've learned because you're supposed to provide value. And then later you talk about, oh gosh, I'm going to get the names wrong. Was it Ron or Tom? The Volvo.
Tom sells the Volvos, Ron sells financial stuff.
Then you talk about the fact that how much he services long-term clients and knows about their, and he was so upset when he lost that long-term client. So what's the middle ground between hunting and providing value to existing clients and hopefully long-term clients?
I'm smiling because that is one of the top 3 issues in sales today in the whole world. Most salespeople live in what I call a hybrid role, where you're supposed to maintain a portfolio, a book of business, a territory, a list of accounts. It's called different things, right, in different industries, but it's your existing past customers. And yet you're all supposed to go out and find new customers and then grow that portfolio, that territory, et cetera. And the balance of how much service do you do to retain and keep in touch versus how much hunting time do you carve out is always the biggest challenge. But what I can tell you anecdotally from my own observations is that 90% of salespeople default to overservice versus hunting and looking to create. And they use the overservice as a very convenient excuse not to prospect, not to hunt, or not to go deeper in pursuit of customers that you already have, but they buy 5% from you and they could be buying 40% from you of their total purchases per se. So it is a balancing act. And I understand when people say, Mike, I don't understand what you're saying. I work so hard to get a customer. How could you tell me not to service them? And I'm not telling you not to service them, but I'm begging you not to babysit them. I'll give you I'll use banking in this example. Bankers all belong to country clubs and they love to take their clients to play golf. And it's a great 5 hours together and they do some drinking or they have a lunch at the club and they're on the course, they're talking business and the banker's even playing consultant to the client about financial options and treasury management and new ways to do lines of credit. It's beautiful. I get it. The problem is that most bankers use that country club membership to take their favorite clients to play golf over and over and over again. And my message to them is re-pursuing your favorite clients where you already have the lion's share of their business is not going to grow your income or grow your business. You're going to keep them. You're cementing a relationship and that's great. But here's the big accounting phrase I'll give you. What's the opportunity cost from overserving and babysitting the clients that love you and not going after the jerk client that gives you a small percent of the business or the non-client that you don't serve at all, but they look and profile like you should be serving them. So it's a balance and it's not easy. And I love the story you brought up in the book where Tom was upset, the Volvo guy, that one of my friends didn't buy from him a second or third time after all the keeping in touch that Tom had done with him. But what I loved about it was when I told him the bad news that he had lost his customer, at least temporarily, his response was priceless. He didn't blame his company for overwhelming him with work. He didn't blame the marketing people that hadn't sent out enough keep in touch emails, right? He didn't blame my friend Donnie for being a cheap bastard and going to a different dealer to get lowball. He didn't even blame the other dealer. He looked at me and goes, you know what? That hurts, but it's on me. I should have done a better job keeping up with him. I should have been more all over it. And I know this guy. I'm like, we become good friends. And no one is in more touch with his clients than Tom is. It wasn't Tom's fault. It was just life.
Yeah.
But I loved his reaction that as a winner, as a top producer, as a guy who's so well known. I mean, he's the number one guy in North America. He sold 490 cars last year. Like car salespeople don't sell. Do the math on how many cars a month, a day that is. The people in the plant in Sweden, they know him by name. Like, this is the guy. So when he looked at me and he took it on himself, he goes, man, that's on me. That's my bad. I'm like, that's why you're such a winner, because you own the outcome and you believe it. So that was refreshing to me.
Yeah, that was great. I mean, earlier we talked about there's victims and then there's winners, and he could have sat there and said, like you said, he could have been mad. So you still have a few minutes?
Yeah, I got about 3 or 4 minutes. I can hang with you. Yeah.
So let's finish on something fun. Let's finish on politics, because you have a whole chapter and you talk about the 2016 election.
Here we go. Buckle up.
Yeah. And
buckle up.
You do a lot of, in this environment there's actually a line that I wanted to ask you about, but it had to do with winning. And it's hard to win an intelligent argument with people untethered to the truth because their livelihood is tied to the agenda. We won't even get into that. But when I talked to Bob Berg, he said there's a lot of, it used to be I'm right, you're wrong. Now it's I'm right and you're evil, shut up. So you preface it all by saying, I'm not making a political judgment here, but from a purely sales and marketing argument, you talk about the difference between whether you believe it or not, or like it or not, Trump's messaging, Make America Great Again, and Hillary's messaging. So I'd love for you to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So let me throw out the big disclaimer so everyone can take a deep breath. I voted for myself in 2016, and I took a picture of my ballot to prove it. I got a total of 3 votes. Not all of my children and my wife voted for me. So there's some perspective. And I realize that this country and even the world is so divided right now, you can't have a rational conversation. So everyone take a deep breath. Let's put that on the side. I wrote this chapter because for 2 years since the election, I've been carrying around my observations as a sales coach of why Trump won and why Hillary lost. And I make no claims that this is a comprehensive list. I've got a bunch of lessons in the book for salespeople from a sales coach's view. So I ran this chapter by my friends on the left and the right. Everybody gave me a thumbs up. Then I played it down the middle. So I didn't have a horse in the race. And I just think there's some really powerful lessons. And I've been really pleased. If you look at the hundreds of reviews on Amazon already, everyone's complimenting that chapter. No one is saying that I've lost my mind or I'm fanatical. So that made me happy that people actually listened to my disclaimer. I mean, the publisher wanted to take this chapter out of the book. And because they were just so scared it would turn. And I'm like, stop. It's a book on truth. Stop being such a wimp. I'm just giving a sales coach's perspective. I made no claim this was a comprehensive list. Let's just look at these lessons. So, okay. Having said that, you want to talk about messaging.
Yeah.
Right. So you may know this better than me because of your background. I'm just sharing what I saw when I was able to research. If you think about both candidates' messages, whose was stronger, whose was more memorable, whose was more focused on the constituents and their needs, their desires, their fears, and their outcomes, right? And as you think about that, Hillary's message, and by the way, if you can't remember what her core message was, good for you, because she tested like 84 different slogans and core messages. So not only was it always changing, but the stuff that actually stuck was like, hashtag I'm with her. Help her break the glass ceiling. She's earned it between her long career and from everything she had from Secretary of State to Senator to First Lady to the guilt that we owed her because she put up with her philandering husband for all those years. Like, she's the smartest woman ever. Like, it was all about her, right? That's not a good message when we're selling, because what do people care about? They care about what's in it for them. They care about their own issues, not the candidate's issues. And Trump, as unlikable and arrogant and different and pompous and low EQ as he can be, what was his core message? Make America great again. And let's level the playing field on trade. And let's stop this craziness with immigration. And as misogynistic and goofy as some of the other things he said were, let's stop immigration from Muslim countries to protect us from internal terrorism. Whether you like or hate that or think he's a bigot or a racist is not important. That what I'm trying to get at is he was listing issues that were on everybody's mind, from people in the Rust Belt who had lost their jobs and felt like potentially the Democrats who had represented them for a long time were no longer able to provide them with a meaningful opportunity for a living. And Trump is like, let's bring manufacturing back to America again. Like, the messaging was completely outcome and others centered on Trump's side, and very self-focused on Hillary's side. And I think that's a very strong takeaway for us.
Yeah. And if you look back, if you look at 2008, the late John McCain, incredible. I've utmost respect, but he ran a resume campaign at a time when the economy fell out. And Obama, whether or not you agree he represented this, had one word: hope. You look back, it's the economy, stupid, right? Versus George W. Bush kind of ran a resume campaign. Yes. And there was an article in which David Axelrod said Hillary has finally found her message, and it's in Trump, and it was all about Trump. And it reminded me of a talk that Steve Jobs gave when he first came back to Apple after being out in the wilderness. And he came back and he gave a now famous talk where he said, the way we're going to we're spending a ton of money on the Apple brand and you wouldn't even know it. He said, the way we're going to bring back the brand isn't to talk about gigahertz. It's not to talk about circuits in a box. We do a great job making circuits in a box. And by the way, it's not to talk about how bad Microsoft is. We have to talk about something different, and it has to be about the people. And he went on to launch the Think Different campaign, which didn't even show the product, but it wasn't about we're great. And I think from a purely marketing messaging perspective, that's what it's all about. Listen, there are people out there, forget politics, bring up Apple versus non-Apple, and there are people who get viscerally upset.
Yes.
How do you carry that evil iPhone? It's like the evil empire. And they get all mad. And you know what? Apple's fine with that because they get thousands of people to wait in the snow, sleet, and hail for an electronic brick. So
awesome.
I think it's similar.
Yeah. And we can go a lot of places with this, but there's a lot of lessons. There's a couple more let me just bring up from the political thing. Let's talk about, because since I've already made the case you shouldn't overserve your existing customers, let me tell you where Hillary took that to a crazy extreme, right? Because if you ignore your existing customers, they're going to go away. And I'm going to use the state of Wisconsin as the example here. The Rust Belt has been traditionally Democrat. They call it the blue wall, right? The trusty blue wall since the Reagan days. Hillary was the first major party candidate to not visit the state of Wisconsin since whatever it was back before Reagan. Okay. I want you to think about that. She didn't, once she was nominated, did not step foot in the state of Wisconsin. Not one time, not to show up and say, thank you. I appreciate you. I hear you. I'm for you. I got to run. I got to go to these other states, but I know I got you. I'm for you. She didn't show up. Trump won the state of Wisconsin by 0.7 percentage point. You can't tell me that there weren't people that when they walked in the voting booth that day, even undecided, said, this woman doesn't even care about us. She didn't even come to our state to say hello. This guy is at least promising something to me. Let me go this direction. So while I don't want us to overserve our existing customers, you better not ignore them because people change, power shifts, your contacts go away. You better get deep into those organizations. You better appreciate them. You better thank them. And let me bring up one more. And I'd love to hear your take because it sounds like you have a maybe even more political passion than I do. I've really become politically neutral here. But I love the political conventions. And every 4 years, I just kind of get a little thrill. Maybe it's the hats and the flags or whatever of watching both parties full convention. I'll watch all 4 days of each. And every time, and from my adulthood, the Democratic convention trumps the Republican convention. And I don't know if it's because Hollywood is more on the Democrat side, so they get all that production quality and the geniuses that are good at putting on a show behind them. But the Democrats' convention is always better. And that's never been more true than 2016. The Republican convention was a flat out disaster. I mean, the opening night speaker was Scott Baio from Happy Days of my youth, right? And they never came together and coalesced. And Ted Cruz spoke the night before Trump, and he basically not only did he not endorse Trump, he told people to vote your conscience. Like it was as divided a convention ever. It was awful. No attention to detail, no showmanship. It was pathetic. A week later, the Democrats and Hillary in her white suit and the balloons and the confetti and the flags and the tear-jerking videos and perfect speeches and every celebrity in the world endorsed. I mean, it was phenomenal convention. Who won the election?
Yeah,
Trump. And my lesson for salespeople is you don't win the big deal in the boardroom on presentation day. It's the work you do on the front end, getting to meet people, building consensus, doing discovery, getting in deep with stakeholders so that when you show up on presentation day, you can tie all that together. And then you really win the deal by the follow-up and things you do after the big presentation. So it's what happens before and after, not on presentation day in the boardroom. And if you were to totally pick the president based on the conventions, Hillary would have won in a landslide. Like Trump's convention was a D, maybe an F, and hers was an A. But who won? So it's just a lesson. Like those are really good lessons for us as salespeople about putting deals together and thinking and not ignoring our clients and how we should be messaging.
It's funny. And I think it also goes back to the you can't take likes to the bank. We used to have a phrase that, signs don't vote, yard signs don't vote. And you would have candidates who, their ego gets in the way. And so we would joke that the most important place for a yard sign is between the candidate's home and his office or her office. Because, oh my gosh, I see 5 signs on the way to the office, I feel good. And when you look at, time and again, like you said, the Democratic convention is better and more well put together and highly produced than the Republican convention. But we've had Republicans and Democrats. And so in the end, the glitz and the glamour, yeah, you have a bump. Hell, John McCain was winning coming out of the convention. He had actually a pretty good lead coming out of the Republican convention. That in the end, again, it's the tried and true traditional. You got to talk to the voters. You have to deal with the voters. I remember that summer. So I still had my agency. I had some DC clients, and it was this kind of, you talk about smoke-filled rooms. It's true. I was in this cigar bar. It was this private, like, members only thing where it was like Get Smart. You had to go through doors and like metal doors to get in there. And there was this kind of elder, he had a lobbying firm. I don't even remember his name, but everyone's like, yes, Mr. They bowed to him. And he was sitting there, it was right after the convention, the Republican convention. He was just livid and so upset at how Trump has ruined this. And he's going to this was the perfect opportunity to win. And that convention was a disgrace. And he was so mad, and that's it. And I was going to help with the campaign. I won't even touch it now. But it just goes to show how many people were dead convinced that, it's the likes, it's the glitz, it's the glamour. I got this many video views and this many likes. And in the end, it was something that was very basic. He talked to people. He made it about them, whether or not you agree with him or not. He visited Wisconsin. If she had visited Wisconsin one time, it may have made a difference. So,
First of all, I love your story of the elder in the secret room and his take on it. I mean, what a great example. Yeah, there's powerful lessons, and that's why I wrote it. And I had to sell the publisher on keeping it, but I'm like, let's not be wimpy here. So I'm really thankful for the opportunity. I'm thankful for you letting me visit with you and your listeners. And I just point people to Sales Truth. I didn't hold back. I felt like this was the book I most wanted to write, and the message that sellers and business owners most need right now, because there's so much confusion and so much nonsense out there. So thank you.
Well, thank you for coming on the show, Mike. Again, for everyone listening or watching, the book is Sales Truth, Debunk the Myths, Apply Powerful Principles, Win More New Sales. Mike Weinberg, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Curt. All the best.